I'm 25 years old, and loneliness has started to feel heavier as Valentine's Day approached. I told myself it was just another day, but everything around me seemed designed to remind me that I was alone. So when I couldn't take it anymore, I opened Tinder again, hoping to find anyone who could help me avoid spending Valentine's Day by myself. I matched with a girl named Gothica. Her profile immediately stood out. She had dark hair, sharp eyeliner, and a calm, unreadable expression in every photo. Her bio was short and vague, mentioning movies, late nights, and deep conversations. There was something about her that felt different, but I couldn't place what it was. When she messaged first, asking if I had Valentine's plans, I answered honestly and said no. She replied almost instantly and suggested we meet. We decided on a movie. When I met her outside the theater, she smiled and said my name in a way that made it sound deliberate, like she was committing it to memory. During the movie, she leaned in close and whispered comments that had nothing to do with the screen. She asked if I liked being alone and whether I ever felt invisible. Sometimes she laughed at scenes that weren't funny, then went silent during moments meant to be emotional. I noticed more than once that she was watching me instead of the movie. I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling in my chest. Dinner afterward felt lighter at first. She joked with the waiter and talked about the film she loved. Then, without warning, she asked about how many girls I had dated before her. I shrugged and answered casually. She followed up immediately by asking how many of them I had slept with. The question caught me off guard, and I laughed awkwardly, trying to brush it off. She tilted her head and smiled. "Men only care about one thing," she said, the tone sharp but controlled. Before I could respond, she laughed and waved it off like a joke, asking what dessert I wanted. The sudden shift in her mood left me confused. I felt like I was talking to two different people sharing the same body. After dinner, I asked if she wanted to come back to my place for a couple of drinks. I expected her to hesitate, but she agreed immediately, almost eagerly. The speed of her answer surprised me, but I told myself I was overthinking it. At my apartment, she looked around slowly, taking everything in. She ran her fingers along the walls and glanced into rooms without asking. At first, she acted normal, making small talk and laughing easily. Then the question started again. She asked how many girls had been there before, how often I brought dates home. She asked whether I had slept with those girls in the same place. I tried to joke and change the subject, but she did not seem amused. "I don't like men who recycle memories," she said quietly. The tension in the room grew uncomfortable. Then, just as suddenly, her expression softened. She smiled brightly, stepped closer, and acted playful again, as if nothing strange had been said. She took my hand and led me toward the bedroom, laughing lightly as she went. I followed her, ignoring the feeling that something wasn't right, convincing myself that this was just nerves, and the night was finally going the way I had hoped. I knew something was wrong with the way her mood kept changing, but I ignored it again and again because I was desperate for some action. Loneliness has a way of dulling your instincts, and desperation makes red flags look like harmless quirks. When Gothica led me into the bedroom, I followed without protest, even though the uneasy feeling in my stomach had only grown stronger. Inside, she stopped near the bed and turned to face me. "Turn off all the lights," she said. The request felt strange. There was no playfulness in her voice this time, just expectation. I hesitated, joking that it felt like the start of a horror movie, but she didn't laugh. She only repeated herself, slower. Against my better judgment, I reached for the switch and plunged the room into complete darkness. The silence felt thick. I couldn't see her, couldn't even tell where she was standing. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, when suddenly a violent force grabbed my hair. Pain exploded across my scalp as a fist yanked upward, tearing out a clump of my hair from my head. I screamed, instinctively trying to pull away, my heart slamming against my ribs. I fumbled for the light switch and slammed it on. Gothica was sitting upright on the bed, her posture rigid and unnatural. Her eyes were rolled so far back that only the white showed. Her mouth moved rapidly, whispering words I couldn't understand, syllables that sounded wrong. The sound made my skin crawl. It didn't feel like a language. It felt like a ritual. I stumbled backwards and shoved her hard, trying to put distance between us. She fell back onto the mattress, but her hand never loosened. Her fingers were still tangled in my hair, gripping it with terrifying strength. She let out a scream that didn't sound human, her voice cracking and overlapping with itself. "I have you now," she shrieked. "I control you now. for the rest of your life. I panicked. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone as I called 911. I screamed into the receiver, barely able to explain what was happening. The operator tried to calm me, asking for details and telling me help was on the way. Behind me, Gothica rocked back and forth in the bed, still chanting, still smiling through her screams. I watched in horror until I heard sirens. The sound changed everything. Gothica froze mid-chant. Her head snapped toward the window, her expression sharpening with sudden focus. She released my hair and sprang off the bed with unnatural speed. Before I could react, she rushed to the window, threw it open, and without hesitation climbed out. She jumped. I ran to the window just in time to see her hit the grass below with a dull thud. She didn't scream. She stood up, looked straight at me, and smiled. Then she disappeared into the darkness beyond the apartment complex. When the police arrived minutes later, my apartment looked like a crime scene. Hair scattered on the floor. The bed sheets were twisted and stained with sweat and blood. I told them everything. They listened carefully, exchanging looks that made me feel small and foolish. They checked my phone. Her profile was gone. No messages, no photos. It was as if she had never existed. They searched the area outside, but there was no sign of anyone injured, no footprints, and no witnesses. Eventually, they told me it was likely a disturbed individual who fled when she heard the sirens. But even as they spoke, I could feel it. The deep certainty that what had happened was not normal. A week passed. I barely slept. Every sound in my apartment made me flinch. I checked locks repeatedly and avoided mirrors, afraid of what I might see reflected back at me. I kept replaying her words in my head, wondering if she meant them, or if she had simply been trying to scare me. One evening, while walking home from the grocery store, I cut through the small park near my building. The sun was setting, casting long shadows between the trees. I was almost at the exit when I heard someone calling me in a sing-song voice. Tane. My blood ran cold. The voice came from behind a large tree off the path. Slowly, I turned, and Gothica was standing behind that tree. Her grin was wide, stretching unnaturally across her face. Her eyes locked onto mine, sharp and knowing. I blinked hard and rubbed my eyes. When I looked again, there was nothing there. I stood frozen for a long time, listening, waiting for her voice to return. It didn't. But even now, I don't know what scares me more. That I really saw her, or that she found a way to stay inside my head, watching, waiting, controlling me from somewhere I can't see. I had just graduated from university. My friends and I went on a little grad trip to celebrate, but once I got home, I realized I hadn't made any plans for my 22nd birthday, which was just around the corner. Since all my girlfriends were off doing their own things already, I thought I might as well fool around on Tinder. I've never been regularly on it, but every once in a while I get a little itch for a squeeze, and Tinder's always been able to satisfy that. As per usual, I matched with a guy fairly quickly. He was about my age with the kind of build that I like. Tall but not skinny, and not so tall that he's weird looking. He was clean cut too, shaven with an almost military haircut and some pretty sharp clothes. We talked a little bit, and I was hoping to talk a bit more before we met. But this guy was very forward and asked to meet almost immediately. He never even asked me what I got my degree in when I told him I just graduated from college. Of course, I had my own intentions of seeing him from the beginning as well, but I would have taken a little more time to get there if I'd gotten my way. I tried to get him to be more open about himself before I outright agreed to anything, but he wasn't super willing to talk about his interests. All he said was that he'd been a little down recently because he was hurting on money, but he really wanted to take me on a date despite that. That's when he suggested a bar I'd never been to, and acted like he was a well-known regular there. I jokingly asked if he was an alcoholic or something, but he brushed it off and said we should talk about that in person, with the excuse that he wasn't a great texter and was more of a talker. I was skeptical of this, but after a little more, he finally broke me down and I agreed to meet him later that night. At first, it was a relief to see that he actually looked like what he did in the pictures, but the relief wore off pretty quickly. I couldn't get over the fact that there was something off-putting about him. It had to be the gaunt stare in his eyes or the smile that looked so forced. But for some reason, I just wanted to brush it off and give him a chance to loosen up. We both had a few drinks and talked for the next couple of hours, but things were weird the whole time. For one thing, his interactions with the bartenders didn't make it seem like he was a well-known regular at all. but I didn't say anything about it. I didn't really get a chance, actually. Throughout the night, he kept asking me if I wanted to meet him at the hotel he'd been staying at for the past few nights, but I kept brushing it off. I didn't like the sound of that for several reasons, the least of which was the fact that if he was really tight on money like he said he was, then it was probably some cheap, creepy motel. But more so was that it made his intentions painfully clear. He was just looking for a one-night stand. After a while, I decided to pay for my drink so I could start heading out. However, my date stopped me and became insistent that he pay for me. Whoa, what the hell are you doing?
Well, you said you were short of money.
No, that's really sweet, but you don't have to. I'll take care of it. I'd have a guilty conscience if I made you pay.
Really? It's fine. It's just a few drinks. I don't have to.
Being too nice! Stop making this harder on me! I'm sorry. That was ridiculous. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to snap at you like that. That was inexcusable.
It's okay. You can pay.
I'm just a little drunker than I thought I was.
It's fine.
After that outburst, I started texting all of my friends looking for a way out. I was hoping that just one of them would be able to get me, but they all basically ignored me. I should have ditched him and went home by myself, but I just got so bummed out that I felt like I really needed a date for the rest of the night, so I folded and agreed to go to his hotel room. Again, I was expecting something dingy, so I was baffled when we walked into the lobby of a 5-star high-rise hotel. I couldn't tell whether to be mad at him for lying about how much money he had or to be glad that he actually wasn't broke. But then things took a drastic turn for the worst. My heart sank when he immediately locked the door behind us. I then looked all over his room and it was completely clean. Not like he'd been living there for multiple days like he said. The only thing in there was a big empty suitcase. I turned around and felt my blood run cold and saw the smile of a psychopath on his face.
Why are you laughing? Where is all your stuff?
I'm looking right at it. And since then, the suitcase has been retrieved within a nearby forest. The story was inspired by a tragic Tinder date gone haywire. As portrayed in the animation, a woman named Grace meets up with a man on Tinder named Jesse. In the footage below, the pair can be seen meeting at a bar and grabbing drinks, and even going as far as hooking up. The pair then head to the man's hotel flat. Hours later, the man can be seen as the only one that appears to leave the flat, without a trace of the woman. The man was seen holding a suitcase while checking out, which prompts investigators to only assume the worst. Police have since apprehended the man, who has now been serving jail time.
I'm not proud of how lonely I got after my breakup. I'm 40 and work in tech. Let's just say I don't exactly light up a room. After the end of a 5-year relationship, I hit a pretty low place. That's when I downloaded Tinder. I used Tinder as a temporary distraction from serious relationships. And one day, I met Darla. She was 35 with red hair, kind eyes, and a smile that somehow made me feel seen. A little quirky, sure. She said she lived in an old farmhouse on the outskirts of town and cared for her paralyzed grandfather. She was funny, honest, and actually seemed interested. After a couple of casual dates, she invited me to stay over at her place. She said it would be nice to cook me something homemade, and she didn't like leaving her grandpa alone at night. I hesitated for a second, thinking how fast it was moving, but I was craving connection, so I agreed. The farmhouse was far into the woods. It looked old but cozy, surrounded by a rustic charm. She greeted me with a kiss and a warm smile, then showed me around. The living room was full of antiques. The kitchen smelled like herbs and raw meat. She said she was making stew, her grandfather's favorite. That's when I first noticed something strange. Big chunks of raw meat sitting out on the counter. No fridge, no ice. I asked if she was going to put them away.
Nah, the doctor prescribed it that way. Grandpa's on a full meat diet, you know?
As night came, the farmhouse grew eerily quiet. We sat on the couch and talked, but my eyes kept drifting to the hallway, to Grandpa's door. She said he was paralyzed, couldn't speak, and hadn't left his bed in years. But I never once heard him. No creaks, no coughs, nothing. At around 11, she got up, saying she needed to change her grandpa into sleeping clothes and give him his medicines. After she left, I started to feel bored, so I wandered around the house. I walked over to the basement door. Out of curiosity, I opened the door and a wave of reeking odor hit me in the face. It smelled like something died down there. I grabbed my phone for light and started down the wooden stairs. As I descended, my knees started trembling. There were jars, dozens of them, filled with what looked like human parts. Fingers, eyeballs, and pieces of flesh floating in cloudy red fluid. There were crates stacked with bones. Some still had blood and skin on them. And hanging from the ceiling on rusted meat hooks were human torsos, cut open, ribs exposed. One still had a wedding ring on. I threw up right there. What the hell? Suddenly, I heard a sound upstairs. The bathroom door swung shut. I rushed up the stairs, locked the basement door again, and returned to the couch just in time. Darla smiled at me.
Everything okay?
I forced a grin. Yeah, just stretching my legs. My brain was screaming. I needed to get out, fast. But I noticed a deadbolt on the front door, and there was no key in sight. I didn't want to raise suspicion, so I told her I was worn out and asked if I could lie down. She agreed and led me down the hallway, right past her grandfather's room. The door of the room was open, and I saw this small window near the bed. The window was just large enough for me to climb through, which was likely my only escape route. She pointed me at the guest room across the hall.
I'll be back in a minute with blankets. Just make yourself at home.
As soon as she left, I tiptoed into Grandpa's room. It was pitch black. I used my phone again, low brightness. He was lying in bed. His face was hidden behind a curtain hanging from the ceiling, like in hospitals. There were stacked up plates under his bed with flies buzzing on them. My blood curled, thinking I was in the same room with the cannibal. I kept my eyes on him and moved toward the window. It was old and stiff, but I managed to slide it open inch by inch without making much noise. I was almost done when I heard slow, raspy breathing coming from the bed. I froze. I looked back, and without warning, the man's head turned. It snapped to the side like a doll. His eyes opened wide, and I swear on my life, he smiled. Not a soft smile, a grotesque, crooked grin that stretched too far. His teeth were sharp and filthy, like they'd grown past what was human. I panicked and climbed out the window, scraping my arm on the way down. I didn't stop to look back. I just ran through the woods until I hit the main road. I hitchhiked to a gas station, from where I called the cops. They went back to the house that night. Here's the part I still don't understand. When they got there, the house was empty. Darla, Grandpa, and the horror in that basement were all gone. They said the place hadn't been lived in for years. They showed me property records. The last listed owner was a man named Roy Miller, a butcher. He had been paralyzed after a farm accident in the late 90s. He died in 2003. And Darla? There was no record of anyone with that name connected to the property. No license, no social, nothing. I check the news every week for stories about missing men, and I can't use dating apps anymore. But sometimes, at night, I'll dream about that house. And in the dream, I'm back in that room, staring into those wide, dead eyes of that old cannibal, as the broken grin slowly stretches across his face.